Hello and welcome to It's All Kicking Off, another football roundtable podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, Andy Murray from What Culture Football, and Simon Gallagher from What Culture Football as well. We are here to discuss another burning football issue, but before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from for daily football podcasts. But gents, we are gathered here today to discuss football rules that failed. And the catalyst for this is this dreadful new handball rule, because today some insane news has come out from lawmakers IFAB, that's the International Football Association Board, reviewing their decision to obviously disallow Jesus' goal against Tottenham for Man City over the weekend. I say reviewing their decision. They have announced there will not be a review into that decision. That is as much as they've reviewed it.
Surprise.
Lucas Brudd said the laws are fairly clear. It's more about acceptance and communication rather than saying, oh, now we have to react immediately and change something. We constantly monitor what is happening in football every day, and if we feel that something needs to be reviewed, then of course we put it on the agenda. They're not going to review that decision, despite the fact that everyone thinks this new handball rule is ridiculous and it's tainting VAR, in my opinion. What did you make of it?
It's ridiculous. The best thing about it, though, is that statement is basically, here are two paragraphs to say, nah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Chief.
It doesn't even, it basically spells out, it doesn't even matter whether we're wrong or not. We're just not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's the whole, just accept it and move on.
It's about acceptance. It's not about rules. It's about moving on with your life.
You'll take this slop and you will eat it.
Like everyone universally, players, coaches, fans, pundits, everyone has said that's nonsense. Even Hugo Lloris, who obviously conceded the goal and got a result as a result of that decision, was laughing about it when the referee explained that no, it's not a goal, it's a handball, despite the fact that if it had hit the defender's arm, it wouldn't have been given as a penalty. What did you think?
No, it's a farce of a thing. I get the impression that this is the kind of situation where it's going to take literally dozens of examples of this to arise before they actually do something about it, which is quite interesting because in the Women's World Cup, you had that fiasco with keepers coming off the line, which as a Scottish person stung me deeply. Yeah. But no, it's completely hampering the whole flow of the game. It takes away the natural order of things with where your hands. You're going to have to tie your goddamn limbs behind your back, and even then you're not safe. It's ridiculous. It's I was quite pro VAR at the beginning, but things like this have just really turned me against it.
Yeah, I think
it's the minutiae, isn't it?
Yes.
The little bits of rules where they've adapted them are the things that are spoiling VAR. The things that wouldn't have even occurred to anybody to be things that would disallow goals.
Like no one had any. I certainly didn't see any protestations when they brought in goal line technology because it was a black and white issue.
Yeah.
And yes, it is making football more and more clinical, but to a ridiculous extent now. And I don't think this is VAR's fault. I mean, granted, if we didn't have VAR, then it wouldn't have been noticed because they only subsequently on checking the goal did they see is it Aymeric Laporte, I think his arm who hit. But it's the rule itself.
Yeah,
and
it's nonsense.
And I don't understand what needs to happen for them to, if they're saying this now, how big of a decision or big of an influence on a game does it need to have? You had the PSG penalty, Man United penalty given against PSG during the Champions League last season. You've had this with the winners of the Premier League last season with one of their closest contenders this year. Obviously, Liverpool are probably a little bit closer. So how big of a decision does it have to be? Do you want a Champions League final?
Yeah, it might have to be that. It'll either be one massive decision or a build-up of slightly smaller ones like this. I think it's ridiculous.
It's the fact that they, haven't noticed the whole groundswell of support for changing the handball rule and just gone, no, I think it looks fine, despite the fact it was a completely legitimate goal and a completely accidental handball.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely here for the banter of City getting this winner ruled out. It's good crack. It's good patter. But at the same time...
It will never affect us.
No, exactly. It didn't affect Aberdeen, so I don't care.
And it certainly will never have VAR in non-league football right now. So. But we're going to use this as a jumping off point to talk about football rules that failed? Because there's been a checkered history, I think it's fair to say. Andy, start us off. What's one of the football rules that you remember failing spectacularly?
Yeah, golden goal can eat the dirt forever, eternally. It's like one of my favorite phases of any knockout competition has always been extra time, because everyone's tired, no one can stand up, everyone's had enough football, they're done, they've emptied their gas tanks, and they're just gonna, it's the equivalent of two boxers in round 12 just throwing wild haymakers, trying to knock each other out. And in extra time, you get like mad sloppy goals. You usually get like 2 or 3. It's fun, it's exciting, it's a car crash. I love everything about it. But what Golden Goal did was it encouraged every single goddamn team in the world not to press, not to keep going, not to have fun and create a fun, enjoyable viewing experience, but to sit back for fear of conceding. And you got these dull, tedious 30-minute to 50-minute periods where nothing happened. Occasionally someone would break and score, but it wasn't worth it for those fleeting moments of euphoria. For the most part, extra time, one of the most exciting periods of any game, became an absolute slog. I hated it, and I dance on its grave to this day.
I quite liked Golden Goal back in the day.
He says that like such an SPL fan. His idea of perfect football is just chaos everywhere.
Yes, it is. Give me chaos.
They then tried to fix Golden Goal with Silver Goal, which was... I actually really like Golden Goal. I think it's good because it's like... I'm a Newcastle fan, so every time we lose or win, it's been via some awful reason or something that you can like throw in people's faces, which makes supporting things much easier, much better. So for there to be an element of banter about how you win a game, I think that's just good. I think it's nice. I think football these days is a bit more boring than it used to be. You play one up front. People sit back naturally. For something like the Golden Goal, it would change things. But then the Silver Goal came in, and it was neither down nor something, as they say.
Yes.
They sort of wanted to reward pressing, but then it was like, well, we're only going to do that until the end of the half that you score in. So, the lawmakers turned on that one pretty much straight away.
I think there was one game ever that was decided by Silver Goal. I had no idea what it was. Was it?
Yeah,
oh, good grief.
Celtic, yeah.
Good grief. Well, see you later, Celtic.
Maybe I've got sort of rose-tinted glasses when I'm trying to remember Golden Goal.
It's anti-banter. That's why I hate it.
You say that, and I don't really remember teams sitting back. The only game that sticks in my mind for when you talk about Golden Goal is, of course, South Korea versus Italy, 2002 World Cup, because it was a game where Italy dominated. They probably should have won the game in normal time. South Korea, I think Gus Hiddink was the manager, wasn't he? And he was doing a fantastic job there. And yet it went to Golden Goal, and South Korea just got this goal, and suddenly Italy were out of the World Cup.
That's the thing. You got these fleeting moments, like 1 in 12, something amazing like that would happen. But the other 11 were as dull as a Bob Dylan album. Just tedious. Like watching a Jose Mourinho team play.
Yeah. What's one of the rules that you remember just being awful?
So in the 1980s, the lower leagues experimented with the idea of having 2 points for a home win and 3 points for an away win.
You told me about this just before we came in here, and I was astonished. I had no idea that this was a thing.
It's just unnecessary and ridiculous because, admittedly, an away win is still thought of as more difficult.
Yeah.
I don't think it's enough to reward somebody with an extra point, considering a draw, you would get the same amount of points for it. It lasted for a couple of seasons, and it actually decided a title.
Did it?
Win. Yeah, Maidstone won by 1 point, despite the other team winning 3 games in a row at the end of the season. It was just like you get punished for winning games, which just seems completely backwards to me. And then it got dropped in 1986. Pretty much as soon as it came in, and it was just stupid. Like, it's just one of those things where in 1994 World Cup, there was loads of talk before it happened about how Americans wouldn't understand football because it was too boring. So we'll change all these rules. We'll make the goals bigger, and it was
get Diana Ross taking penalties.
Exactly, yeah. And it just seems like that where it tries to increase the entertainment factor when all it does is penalise teams. That's stupid.
That does seem madness, but especially, like you say, when it decides a title race.
Imagine how annoyed you would be if that happened, and especially by 1 point. Fair play if it was like 12.
It reminds me a tiny bit of, there was a Formula One season a while back where they just decided, for the banter, the last race of the season was double points. And it was close to, I think, Lewis Hamilton losing the title, because if whoever he was racing against, if they'd have won the race, would have scored more points just because they were like, double points last race.
Whoa,
Madness. Yeah, 2 points. I mean, I get it. Going away from home and getting a result is tougher, but it's not.
No.
33% tougher.
It's like, I always, like, Arsene Wenger, I'm well aware, is a figure of ridicule in British football now.
And on this channel.
For better or worse. But I always liked his take on away games, and that theoretically there shouldn't really be any difference. Like, if you choose to let a hostile crowd affect you, then that's on you.
Something wrong with the team.
Yeah, it's a psychological weakness if you're letting that happen. So the idea that they, should be worth an extra point it's just barmy, that.
One thing I wanted to mention, which I was kind of disappointed that it failed, was the ABBA style of penalties. Of course, we've been used years and years, especially English football fans, of, you take a penalty, I take a penalty, you take a penalty, I take a penalty. But they changed it up to sort of, I suppose it was to remove the weighting, I suppose, of penalties, because there was some calculations made about the team who took penalties first generally went through more often, and so they mixed it up so that you take a penalty, then I take two, then you take two, and it's slightly difficult to get your head around. Jonathan Pearce's head nearly exploded, I think, when they started off, but he had trouble with goal line technology, so I'm not surprised by that.
He has trouble with slightly too complicated Robot Wars fights. So
yes. But yeah, I quite enjoyed ABBA penalties. I thought it did make things a little bit more interesting.
It's another thing that I have to respectfully disagree, because I thought, again, it was anti-patter. Like, why would you want to take away the gap between penalties? That allows for magic moments like Tim Krul going up to Costa Rica players and shaking their hands and being a fanny. It's the moment where players would just mentally collapse, is when they're walking up to the spot and there's this arena of people shouting, "You're a fanny," and all this stuff at them. I think it's proper magic. It's one of my favourite parts of penalty shootouts.
I simultaneously love and hate penalty shootouts. I hate them.
Awful.
Yeah, I hate them.
Involved in
They're awful and great.
Yeah, I hate them probably because we're English, and up until recently they were one of our many Achilles heels. But when I'm watching them, like the Super Cup final recently, for example, when I'm watching them and I have no involvement in it and I have no team preference, I love it. Like you say, and they've kind of cut back on it, but when they used to have Tim Krul doing stuff like that, Jens Lehmann pulling notes out of his socks to look at where people were going to put penalties. And I always used to love goalkeepers handing the ball to a striker, like holding on to it and all the antics on the line. I don't know why, but they've cut back on that quite a lot, obviously, with their whole making people stay in their line and all of that sort of thing. But it was always very, very entertaining.
It's because fundamentally everybody likes to see people miss penalties.
Yeah.
Your own team aside, if somebody misses a penalty, that's the biggest story in any football match. Yeah, like last night, Pogba.
And often, I mean, that the one last night was a good save. It's that if you half the time when people miss penalties, they spectacularly
just
get penalties.
sky it. Yeah,
they Chris Waddle it.
Yeah.
John Terry is, I mean, honestly, is straight into my veins with that sort of thing.
Especially when somebody tries something where they've been like, I've worked on this on the training ground, and it just spectacularly. There was I think it was
Jan Kermagant. I don't know why his name sticks in my brain. Was it Charlton? I think he was playing for in the playoffs.
Panenka.
And he thought, I'll put Panenka this.
Yeah,
and it was all well and good when Andre Pirlo doing it against England in a World Cup and it looked spectacular and you put Joe Hart on his arse. But the goalkeeper just stood there and caught it.
Yeah.
And everyone was just like, oh, and that's us out of the playoffs. We hate you now.
I'm almost certain that Jermaine Jenas did an attempted chip penalty for Newcastle once. And it got saved similarly.
Oh, do you remember the one when I can't remember who Arsenal were playing, but Arsenal tried to do the one where you pass it forward, and the player runs in, but they missed the ball.
It was Pires and Henry, wasn't it?
Yeah,
good stuff.
Too fancy for my liking.
Yeah, no, it's just Elliott, man.
Speaking of penalties, another thing I wanted to mention, we didn't really have it as much in this country, but do you remember 35-yard shootouts where they just got the ball and ran?
This was an American thing,
it's akin to sort of
Yeah.
an ice hockey penalty shootout, I suppose.
Yeah, vaguely through YouTube clips and other historical artifacts that only Michael Hamflett can remember. Like, why are people so keen to mess with penalties? Like, I know we hate them when our team's there, but it's great crack when a team... England going out of that Euros when bloody Ricardo took his gloves off, saved a penalty, took his gloves off. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you have to tweak the formula.
It's a strange one as well because I think it was supposed to level the playing field, but I don't see how that's any different in terms of skill because admittedly you run with the ball, but then you still have to shoot. I think a penalty is more of a technical.
Yeah, I've always felt
skill.
I mean, it's obviously, again, it was an American thing just to, I don't know why.
Liven things up.
As
for no
if
reason.
football hasn't got enough fans around the world.
The story of that league, the North American Football League, is amazing. Some of the things that happened behind the scenes.
What do they do in there?
Like Paul Cannell went over there from Newcastle in the 70s. He was like a good player at Newcastle, but he's adored in America because he sort of went over there. This has nothing to do with football, but he just had the time of his life. He went out with Jimmy Carter's daughter. He would go to nightclubs all the time, and it was just all this. They all went for a holiday and had the time of their lives. And the people running the league were all like the worst football owners in England at the time.
And my favourite when I glance at American football are, the crowds are growing now, and that's great to see, and the franchises are developing. The fact that Bradley Wright Phillips, no offence, is one of the stars,
The greatest player of all time. Yeah.
of that league is insane. But also the chants. They have some of the worst chants I've ever heard in football.
It's just a different type of fan culture, isn't
It's
it?
surreal. But yeah, also I rewatched some 35-yard shootouts, and they're much the same in terms of percentage of goals.
Yeah.
But I also thought, imagine playing 120 minutes of football, and then they say, instead of just running up and kicking a ball from 12 yards, take it from the halfway line. The goalkeeper's going to be relatively well rested, and he can just leg it out to you, close the angle down. I mean, people talk about when you take penalties and the goal shrinking anyway. Yeah. It must look like a dot when you've got a goalkeeper legging it out to you. You're knackered. You've had to run 35 odd yards to try and put it away.
Yeah. Hey man, how's that adrenaline dump treating you?
Yeah.
It's just all about theatre, isn't it? They have imagined that the build up to the running is like where everybody's going to get more invested, but it isn't. Like you said, the most investment you have is the stuff that's going on as the penalty's about to be taken. It's not while it's being taken. It's the mind games and the pressure and the crowd, pretty much. It's fake entertainment, right? But so it fits that it's an American creation.
I think it works in ice hockey, but not so much in football.
Yeah. No.
One of the final ones I want to discuss here. Do you remember the 6-second rule for goalkeepers? I genuinely don't know whether or not that's still a rule.
I think it would be enforced if somebody was taking the piss, to be honest. But I think a couple of years ago it was enforced, like once. I can remember a couple of times at most since it came in where it happened. And it was when they were being like wildly inappropriate. But when it first came in, it was like they were totally hot on it. So they had the timer on the screen, and if it went over, it was like the commentators would lose their minds about them shaving seconds onto their kickoff times. It was just stupid.
Yeah, it was. I understand the whole time wasting thing, and I'm completely behind discouraging teams from time wasting, but that was nonsense.
Yeah, like I once again find myself on the opposite side of the argument. I am all for a goalkeeper being an absolute wank and holding on to the ball for like 30 seconds, because there's two things that inexplicably make crowds angrier than if you'd like pissed on their mother. The first one is goalkeepers picking up the ball and taking ages
and ignoring the crowd.
Exactly, completely no-selling the whole thing. The other one is, when there's a throw-in and you're at a live game and an opposing player decides to move, I don't know, a yard, as if it's going to make any kind of difference. I love it. Like, for me, football has become like this kind of banter escapade. And, stuff like being a wank and time wasting is just great.
I think, well, I'm sure we'll have a separate podcast talking all about time wasting. But I think I like time wasting, but when it's earned, when you've got to get a little bit creative. Holding on to a football is not creative.
It's not.
Getting the ball, when they sort of hoof it over the top and the goalkeeper sort of chesting it.
Yeah.
And then waiting for the strike to come and then catching it and laying down on the ground and holding it down when that's your team defending and it's a really simple cross and they just catch it. They could just land on their feet, but they completely go to ground and they hold it down there. I think that's far more creative than someone running it in a corner and then just having that little scrap. I mean, we saw that in Liverpool, Barcelona, two of the greatest, Champions League teams last season, and the match ended with just James Milner sort of scrapping away in the corner for it. It was very, very surreal.
It's beautiful stuff.
Was there a rule that I seem to remember where if you goalkeeper bounce the ball twice,
you had to get out of the box?
Apparently not. That is the lie alarm. Yeah, they had to bounce the ball twice, and Yeah, everyone had to get out of the box.
I don't know whether it was an official one, but we certainly played it at school.
Yeah.
I think that might have been a teacher's one where it was B Sporting.
It was akin to the back pass rule, which got removed from some five-a-side games, I seem to remember. Because that was allowed back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't allowed back in goals Aberdeen five-a-side, I can tell you that much. As someone who used to play as a goalkeeper, it was very annoying.
I always used to love that when someone would forget and the goalkeeper basically had to hoof the ball out and concede an indirect free kick or something from about 2 yards out because one of us had forgotten.
Yeah.
There we go again.
Just to go back to the time wasting thing, time wasting is responsible for one of my most rewarding ever moments in football. And it was when Alan Shearer time wasted and Roy Keane lost his mind and threw the ball off Shearer. And Shearer was like put out as if he'd hurt him, and Roy Keane tried to pull Alan Shearer's head off. And Shearer standing, just looking at him, and Roy Keane going at him like a terrier is the greatest image I've ever seen in a football match.
Yeah, players getting wound up by other players, time wasting.
Especially him.
Is
the best thing of all time, man.
So do you think, to come back to our original topic, do you think they are going to eventually rescind this handball rule?
Yeah, I think they'll be stubborn with it. I think we'll get a few more responses from, what's his name? Lucas Brud.
From IFAB.
So Lukey Bird, I think he'll have a few more of these bad boys copy pasted when it happens against, I don't know, Watford versus Stoke. Stoke aren't even in the league. Never mind.
Burnley, it'd be a very Burnley thing,
like there'll be a couple of these smaller games, but maybe it'll happen in like a Champions League semi-final, and Liverpool, God willing, will get screwed out of something. That'd be nice.
Hopefully, some changes in the
Yeah, I agree. They have to justify the fact that they've probably spent like 6 months and thousands upon thousands of pounds sitting in boardrooms going, what rule can we slightly change to justify our existence? And then at the end of the season, they'll change it again to something else.
Yeah.
Do you know that they've changed the drop ball rule this season?
I do.
Ridiculous. Like, there's no need for it.
I was at a Chesterfield game at the start of this season, and the ball hit the referee, as it does, relatively regularly in non-league football, to be perfectly honest. And he stopped the game, and I was completely unaware of this until I was watching some Premier League action the weekend after. But yeah, if the ball hits the referee and it gives an attacking team an advantage, he has to stop the game. And there was some old boys behind me in the stand who basically, I think, considered whether or not they wanted to follow football anymore as a result of this. They were like, this is not like it used to be. It always hits the referee. And then they had the drop ball as a result of that. Yeah. And there was none of this just kicking each other's shins. They just let someone kick it back to them.
I think they didn't ever take advantage of that rule, because the rule of a drop ball was that as many players as you like could contest it. So you could have all just kicked each other up a height. But because of sportsmanship, it was only ever 2 players, and one of them didn't contest.
It annoyed me that also no one took a run up.
Yeah.
It's all nerd.
Here it comes. Right, let us know your favourite football rules that failed in the comment section below, or on Twitter. You can tweet them to us at WhatCultureFC. In fact, watch you there. Follow all 3 of us. You can follow Simon Gallagher at
Cy Gallagher.
You can follow Andy Murray at
Andy H. Murray. The H stands for Harry Maguire's head.
You can follow me, Chesterfield boy, Harry Maguire. You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. You can follow us all at WhatCultureFC, of course, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football for daily football podcasts too. My thanks to Cy and to Andy. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.